Hi, how are you, everybody? Thank you so much for the invitation. It's a great pleasure to be here to see Sophia again. We graduated from the same class. Well, in my case, when I applied for the LLM, I actually applied first for a Fulbright scholarship and then applied to the LLM. And by the time I applied to the LLM, I had already had a few years practicing as a refugee lawyer in my country. So I felt that after practicing for a few years, I needed to take some time off to think about some of the issues that I had been seeing in practice that interested me, but when you're practicing, you don't really have the time to analyze them from a different perspective. So I thought I would benefit from taking courses related to these issues and other issues, getting the perspective from another country, which is a country that receives a lot more refugees than Argentina receives and has a different policy in many respects. So I thought basically that I wanted to get that perspective to enrich my practice when I returned. In my case, I was telling Jessica when she contacted me, in my case, unlike I believe the cases of my colleagues, I took a leave of absence from my position to pursue the LLM and then returned to my previous position. So it was not so much a matter of pursuing a career shift or to change a career path or to try to apply for a fellowship, but it was a matter of enriching my practice and trying also to enrich my academic, the academic aspect of my career, because I'm also a professor at the university and I participate in some research projects. So basically, it was an opportunity, or I was looking for an opportunity to develop these different questions that I had inside me that were the result of the practice in refugee law. And so basically, when I after graduating, I resumed my position coordinating the refugee legal assistance office. And I mean, well, of course, we had to deal with some challenges brought about by different policy shifts that took place in our country after returning. And I also tried to strengthen my academic career path. So as I was saying, I engaged in some research projects. I started participating in some courses that are specifically refugee related courses at the university. Last year, I was in charge for the first time of a course in a postgraduate, in a human rights master's degree in my university, dealing with refugee law. So I think that I'm building the path towards maybe after the LLM pursuing a doctorate in these issues and the questions that I was able to start working on during my time at Columbia are the ones that are sort of feeding this process now. So I think that's the.
Well, on my end, I am also from Argentina, and in some ways, I had a similar career path as Analia. I also got the Fulbright Fellowship and went to Colombia in 2015. And at that moment, I had been working on disability rights and gender issues for 3 years. So I have 3 years of experience when I went to Colombia. And at university, when I pursued my JD, I didn't learn a lot about human rights from a theoretical perspective because of the curriculum of the university. And particularly, I was interested in strengthening my advocacy skills, because after graduation, after getting my JD degree, I went to work for a non-governmental organization, and then at that position, I learned how to be an advocate by doing. But after 3 years, I thought, well, I need like I need to study these issues. I mean, I need to do an LLM program to study these issues and to learn the skills, the skills to be a good advocate. And in addition, I wanted to strengthen my knowledge on human rights and also gender issues. And again, here in Argentina, in general, it depends on the university, but there are not many courses on human rights, especially on gender justice. It's quite strange to learn about gender justice at university, especially at that moment in 2015. We are in 2020 now, with all the debates around abortion here in Argentina and so on. It's more normal to learn about these issues at university now, but at that moment, 5 years ago, I'm not that old. 5 years ago, it was a bit strange, or a bit, yes, it was not common. After graduation, well, I got the LLM Fellowship, and I think that in a few minutes we are going to talk about that in more detail. But I went back to Argentina, and I was a LLM Fellow for 1 year. The organization that hosted me was an organization of people with disabilities. I have known them for quite a while before getting the fellowship. So that was in a way a continuation of my work after graduation. And after the completion of the fellowship, I got a fellowship to go to the Inter-American Commission on Human Rights. I was there for almost a year, and I accepted that fellowship in order to know this organization from the inside, because I thought, well, in order to be a good advocate before this institution, I have to know the institution from the inside and all the dynamics that go there. And yes, in order to be a more effective advocate. Then I went back to Argentina in 2018, and for 2 years I worked for the same organization that hosted me, and as a LLM Fellow. That work was a continuation of my LLM Fellowship in several ways. And since January this year, so in the last 45 days, I've been an independent consultant. I decided to I decided that I needed a new path in my career, a different step. So for the time being, I am an independent consultant. I'm exploring that area. So that might be a bit long. Sorry, Shimei. Here in Argentina, we talk a lot. Sorry.
Not at all, Sophia. Yeah. Hi, everyone. And hi, Jessica and Marisa. So good to see you. Yeah. And before I came to Colombia, I was a criminal litigator here in India. And large part of my practice at that point in time was representing individuals who were accused of terror offenses here and under India's anti-terror legislation, largely. And so that used to be the body of my work. And most of my practice in the chambers that I've worked with, used to be an extremely pro bono practice. And so therefore the idea came in after doing around 3 or 4 years of proper litigation, trial court litigation, and attending courts, having a very civil liberties practice, and also working on a few issues here and there on India's sentencing issues, most particularly with regards to death penalty. I think I was just looking again, and I think practice opened up a lot of questions for me as to how I looked at law, how I looked at criminal law, how I looked at civil liberties, human rights issues. And I think for me, after 3 or 4 years, it just made sense to go back to school and start delving into these issues more in a much better way. And there were issues which I wouldn't have cared about while I was doing my while I was doing my undergrad course back in India, and things like evidence, things like how I appreciated criminal procedure, and then bringing in an issue of death penalty more specifically, and thinking about abolition, which was something which is so alien here. in India at this point in time, and to be able to go back to all of those issues. And for me, it was certainly facilitated by Columbia's Human Rights Fellowship. So I was an LLM Human Rights Fellow last year, and which really helped me. And otherwise, I don't think it would have been possible for me to do a master's in any way. And so I was quite grateful for that to have turned out. And yeah, so I think for me, most importantly, once I came to law school, I think the two things which I say that helped me the most while I was there at Columbia were my human rights clinic, my involvement with them, and how it opened up for me to just think beyond quotes always as this answer for thinking about change, for bringing about change, and for thinking about careers just in terms of that. And secondly, obviously, my involvement with Professor Bernard Harcourt and his course on abolition. And I think that was something more of an eye-opener for me. And I think we are not taught the way in which those abolition was taught here at Columbia. And it was not just a legal course, but more of a movement lawyering course, which really made you think beyond what the criminal law books would tell you. And yeah, I did my hardcore criminal law courses as well with Professor Dan Richmond, and which would be extreme opposite from either of these courses. And like a prosecutor teaching you criminal law, I don't think I would have got better from anywhere else. And on the other hand, you have a defense lawyer like Professor Bernard Harcourt telling you about abolition. And I think that those things were just fantastic for me. And I think they just worked out in the larger scheme of things for me. When I'm at a stage where my career back in India and the questions which I had, which arose out of litigation and being in courts every day, were answered, and which told me that I need to be really thinking out of courts to be thinking about answers that for our everyday thing. And that's how I've landed up with my current fellowship, which is with Reprieve, which is a London-based charity, a human rights organization which works on issues of death penalty and counterterrorism laws. My work is specifically focused on South Asia and to a large extent here in India. And so, yeah, and all of that I'll speak about when Jessica, we'll start talking about postgraduate fellowships. But yeah, so this is why I wanted to come here, and how Columbia was quite instrumental in how getting what I really wanted, and just more than that, and that, if I could say.
Thank you each for that. Another question for each of you is, what do you think is the most important information that current students should know about careers in human rights while in the LLM program?
I have like two related issues on that point. I think that especially the pandemic has taught us that we should learn to be flexible in terms of the way we work and in terms of the issues that we cover in our work. And that's the second point. I think that it's essential to, or at least in my opinion and in my experience, I work on gender issues, and there are a lot of people working on gender issues. Of course, it depends on the country, on the context of each country, but it is a quite popular topic among human rights advocates. So in order to pursue a career on that topic, especially when we are in junior positions, I think that it's essential to combine like a work on the gender, on the general issues around gender issues, for instance, sexual and reproductive rights, but in addition to find a specific area or topic that is not that explored in your country, in your region. And for me, that was the rights of women with disabilities. And there are not that many people, and especially there are not that many lawyers working on the rights of women with disabilities. And in that way, I have been able to like pursue a career on women's rights, and I have been able to get several opportunities working on these issues because there are not many people working on these issues. Of course, I don't really want to be like the disability rights lawyer and that's it, because in several ways, due to the lack of attention to the rights of people with disabilities in several countries in the region, there are not that many opportunities or job opportunities. But I think that at the international level, the trend is quite similar. It's changing, but it's quite similar. So I think I have tried to combine my work on this specific issue with other initiatives and activities that I have developed in the more mainstream area of gender justice. And I think that's also related to the issue of flexibility. And I think, again, to be focused on one issue is important, but many times we are too focused on one issue, and many times we are too focused on a particular way of doing things. And again, the pandemic has taught us that we should be flexible.
Hello?
Okay.
Go ahead,
yeah.
go ahead.
Yeah. Okay. Being flexible about the way and just being more broad-minded about thinking about what you want to be doing beyond this. And I think one thing that was told to me again, I don't know, it was through conversations that I had with professors back again at Columbia. And it's about to think, when you're thinking about human rights careers, I think you need to be very, not clear, but you need to be knowing that with every career opportunity as you go in with organizations, if you're working in this sphere, there is a very legal office of any particular organizations, a very legal sort of practice, which will be much closer to the law. And then there's a human rights practice, which will again be more international, broad-based, advocacy-based work. And I think you need to be clear, or you need to have some sort of an understanding as to what you will be most comfortable doing. For me, I think having that aspect of law around me has always been very important. Like even with my current work, even though it's extremely civil liberties and human rights specific, but again, it deals with research around India, Pakistan, Sri Lanka, and Bangladesh's death penalty regimes, their counterterrorism laws. And it's not as much about the country's advocacy as much as still it's about courts, but it's about finding more creative ways of approaching the court with these issues and trying to find answers through other advocacy means also, which my larger office does. But for me, for the entire office, I'm more of a legal expert when it comes to India. And I think I have very consciously wanted that aspect to be alive for me. And, but yeah, like in terms of careers, again, like if you're just thinking while sitting, I think there's no dearth of resource when you're ever thinking about what can Columbia offer you in terms of your thinking process going forward, and whether or not you have the SJI, you have your own professors and who are extremely approachable about these issues. And, but yeah, I think, again, I'll go back to what Sophia had also said about being flexible. And I think both my work on the counterterrorism work that I did with the Human Rights Institute here at Columbia was so starkly different from anything that I'd done, even if it was with regards to an anti-terror legislation perspective back in India, which was a very legal going to court work. But this told you to think more broadly in terms of why countries are making those policy decisions when it comes to their counterterrorism regime. Why does a US find it so easy to go to Yemen and other countries and have such a strong regime, counterterrorism regime, where they can be not made accountable for all their acts, human rights atrocities that they are committing in the name of securing their own citizens back in the US? And wherein earlier it was more about how we are just singularly thinking about the laws that the US might have to tackle counterterrorism. And I think these issues just made me think, like asked me to expand my understanding, which was very narrow to begin with. And I think, yeah, is what again, agreeing more on what Sophia had said, but I think it's just so much important to be thinking in more of a broad-based sense as to what the issues that you are thinking about can be looked at it from so many different angles.
Yeah, I agree with the flexibility issue is very important. I was thinking the what I was going to mention, that it's actually maybe transformed by the fact that the LLM experience right now is probably in a great sense virtual and not in person. So how that affects how you think about and how you go about planning a career, especially when you have to I mean, many things that you might benefit from the practice, right? For example, if you're, I did an externship, so I don't know how externships are carried out right now in this context. But what I think that is something that's very important, and that the students have probably heard it already many times, is the importance of networking with professors and with organizations that do the kind of work that you are interested in. And I say this because it is something that does not come easy or naturally to me. So if you're someone like me who does not have the networking gene, you have to force yourself somehow. I mean, it's been 5 years since I graduated, and I still think about this. And there has to be a way in which, you know, I think it's cultural in a way, in our culture, in our legal, academic and professional culture. Maybe it's not that common, especially academically, to approach. The universities are more passive in these issues, and it's not the case in the United States in general, and at Columbia in particular. And you have to take advantage of that, because that's, at the end of the day, apart from all the things that you're going to learn, you're going to take with you all those connections, and that's very important. And I was thinking about what Chinmay was saying about how he learned about issues of evidence and things that perhaps were not that changed his perspective. In my case, I remember specifically with the externship. I did the externship at the Bronx Defenders. So coming from a background of public defense in my country, and then experiencing how that works in a different setting, I learned a lot, and it gave me tools that I was actually able to use later, and ways of thinking about cases and case building and gathering all the evidence, etc. That was very useful, because I work at an area of the law that is not very common in my country, and it's not very developed, and there's not a lot of case law, and we're sort of starting to build that. So it was very helpful to experience the practical side of it, not just the theoretical courses.
Thank you. So as we all know, the LLM program is pretty short. It's only 2 semesters. So I'd love to hear from the panelists on any advice you have for how to balance making time for your post-grad planning or working on your career during such a short LLM program.
I think that, at least for me, one of the most important things is to realize that the LLM program is part of your career. You don't abandon your career because you go to the States to pursue your LLM, or because you connect to a computer to do your LLM. That's part of your career. And in this regard, I also think that it's important to think that, well, the more theoretical part of the LLM program should be like 50% of the program for you. The other 50% of the time you should be doing networking. And I agree with Analia, as a quite shy person, I recommend you to network, engage in networking. And in addition, I mean, people in the States are ready and are open to your questions, to your emails, to your visits, to their offices, and so on. So don't be shy, especially if you come from countries where that connection is not that easy as here in Argentina. But also, when you choose the courses, I mean, you should pay attention to theoretical courses. For instance, I took a course with Analia on human rights, critical human rights theory, that was 100% theoretical. But in addition, look for courses with a quite practical element. Not only the clinic, that for me was life-changing in several ways, but also for instance the human rights course of Professor Cleveland. Look for opportunities to be a research assistant. Look for the professor whose work you like, and write him an email and say, hey, I am interested in this issue. I would really like to be your research assistant. Of course, frame it in a very polite way, but connect with them. Look for these opportunities. Don't expect opportunities to come to you, but be proactive in the pursuit of opportunities. And again, all of this to think and to make your LLM program 50% a theoretical experience, but 50% a practical experience. And that practical experience is essentially the part where I say this is also part of your career, because you are building connections, you are building experience, then you write in your CV that you were research assistants for X professor and so on. And that's even, I think in many ways, even more important than the theoretical knowledge you got in your program.
Yeah, like in terms of, again, yeah, I think you need to be thinking about what you need to be doing, like where this LLM features in your entire work trajectory. For me, again, I would be fairly candid, but I wasn't particularly looking forward to working at an international organization when I joined Columbia. For me, the answer was, I knew that I wanted to come back to India and work on issues related to India. And I think what Columbia helped me do was just think and look at organizations which also work in India, which might not be based in India, but which might have other broad-based projects as well, and which could support or better inform their work happening in the region of. And I saw Reprieve's work, and I heard about their work in Pakistan. I had heard about their work in the US and other areas. And when I came to know that there was a scope, even though they did not have an India specific practice before I joined, I think it just looked better given the broad, the long hand that Columbia gives you to just design your own projects and pitch it to organization. And that's what I tried and do with Reprieve. And my proposal to them were two very specific India-based projects, which really helped me, because I thought that they might not take it, but which they were able to accommodate in their current projects which were going on. And it's been great, like, as I would say that, because my work in India with them has been a lot of it has been informed, and a lot of support I've gotten from their other work which has been happening. But yeah, just in terms of this, to go back to where I started, it's just to say that this is something that I wouldn't have thought about, but coming here and getting to know that these were the opportunities. So to know about these organizations very early on, again, my reasons were also fairly different at that point in time. I wanted to be in the UK for the then partner, and so it was more of a personal thing for me to apply to an organization which would take me to UK. That didn't work out because of the pandemic. I'm here in India, but to then start thinking about organizations, and it started fairly early. I think I had started looking at organizations, and I think that just comes from me being from India. I don't think we have that great a passport to be getting visas that easily. So I think it's very important to be securing opportunities much earlier, so that you have other things that can be worked out at a much later stage. And so I started my process by October itself, and which was again suggested to me by people that I was working with at that point in time. And by November or something, I had a confirmation from Reprieve to be joining them, and then it was just a matter of applying for fellowship or looking for funding elsewhere. So I think it was important that I started early, but that's just being unsure as to how many people, how many organizations out there wants to be hiring Indians, or just because of we don't come with that great a passport.
I would just add that if you're in a situation where perhaps you don't have to seemingly worry so much about your career because you sort of know what you're going to do after the LLM, that's very tricky because you might think that you don't have to worry about that, but you do. I mean, and I think that the key there is to know and be very clear about why you are pursuing the LLM. If you know what your objective is, then you're going to make the most of that very short time that you have there. And I remember when, for example, when I had to decide which externship to apply to, and there's a great, the offer is wonderful, and there's the externship at the United Nations, which is an amazing opportunity. And I remember I thought, oh, this is great, this would be so interesting. But I had to stop and think, do I really, am I building a career? Is my career path a United Nations career path? And it was clearly not. So in making that decision, when you have such a rich curriculum and courses, it's not just, okay, I'm going to choose, whatever courses seem that are going to be interesting and I'm going to enjoy them, but you have to really think about what your objective is and what you want to take out of that, even if you have the post LLM issues solved, because as Sophia was saying, otherwise it's just, I'm just taking some time off, and that's not really the goal.
Great. So I'd love to turn to talk about fellowships. Chinmay and Sophia, you each applied for postgraduate fellowships. Can you tell us which fellowships you applied for and what advice you have for putting together a strong application?
Well, I applied to the LLM Fellowship that is granted by SGI at Columbia. The step that I took that was, I think, the most helpful was before traveling to Argentina for Christmas. I went to SGI's office and I read the past applications that were successful. That was like key to prepare my application. If you are in a virtual world now, and perhaps you don't have access, first of all, ask for them, because I think that they might have like an online version of the applications. But if you cannot have access to past applications, you can ask for contact information of past fellows and talk with them about their experience more in detail. I can leave my email in the chat if you want to contact me to talk about the specific issues around applications. But at least in 2016, what I discovered was that the applications that have been successful made emphasis on a component of research, advocacy based on that research. I mean, for a couple of months, fellows conducted research on different topics, then they write a report, and then they conduct some kind of advocacy activities around that report. And in addition, they work with communities themselves. In my case, the project was around women with disabilities, so I proposed a series of workshops with women with disabilities themselves to let them know more about their sexual and reproductive health and rights. But I discovered that all the successful applicants had written similar things around these issues: research, reporting, advocacy, and some component of working with communities. And in addition, it's important to work with quite small organizations. When you think about the host organizations, at least for the LLM Fellowship, think about quite a small organization that really needs you, and where you are going to make a difference. And in addition, think about, in this case, less explored issues, topics, where you as a LLM fellow can make a difference in terms of creating knowledge. And that's also important for your CV, because in the end, you can write a report. I wrote a report about sexual and reproductive health and rights that is unique in Argentina. So, and that was a huge contribution to my CV. So let's explore topic, quite small host organization, and again, these quite key activities that I mentioned before.
Yeah, thanks, Sophia. So I got the Global Public Service Fellowship. Apart from the Global Public Service Fellowship, I also applied for LeapRon, but I think I was more keen on the Public Service because of its focus on Asia, and that was a large part of why I was applying for this. And my work, again, I think for a very strong fellowship application, what really helped me was the clarity that I was able to bring into my project proposal. And again, that came with two things. Number one was the fact that I was able to, as I was mentioning earlier, I'd applied or whatever. I'd started meeting people at SJI by around October, when I was just trying to figure out what is this beast of fellowships that Columbia is offering. And I was able to speak to Maddie at that point in time and Cassandra. And through them, I came to know about the fellowships in October, and started thinking about organizations which work on issues which are related to what my work has been on, which is criminal justice, death penalty, abolition, counterterrorism work, torture. And there were a few organizations that I could think of at that point in time, and Reprieve was something that I'd heard about earlier. And it was a fairly straightforward process from there on. I approached them and sort of gotten a confirmation that they would be happy to have me by the end of November. And I think from that period onward, still I applied for the fellowship in Feb. I think we had several back and forths about designing this project proposal. And again, as Sophia mentioned, working with a smaller organization has really helped me in the sense that the project proposal was very niche, in a sense that it was something that I was able to also propose and also came from them. The ideas which came from me were also because of my extended conversations with, again, Professor Bernard Harcourt. And we both would often speak about what could be the areas that how do we now tackle death penalty, counterterrorism sort of work. What is a new way of understanding and approaching it? And so my two projects that I proposed and that which I'm also working on here, one is a very research-based theoretical academic sort of a project, which is on understanding South Asian countries' counterterrorism regimes and their laws and vis-a-vis death penalty, and to see that how easy it has become to give the death penalty under these broad and vague counterterror laws in South Asian countries. And the other one is finding and representing migrant workers from India who get the death penalty in Middle Eastern and Northern African countries and in Southeast Asian countries. And the idea was to first get to know about, like, Indians don't give as much death penalty, but however, there are a lot of Indian nationals who migrate out as migrant workers to these countries for looking for a better life, but get the death penalty over there, and who are then left without any resources over there because they're far away from their country, far away from any resources. And to then think about counselor assistance, to think about legal representations for these people and putting out the best arguments that you can for these individuals who otherwise don't have any. And so again, these happened because of those elongated periods of my conversations with my organizations, with professors here at Columbia, with SJI, who really were like, again, when you come from India, my CVs or the way that I used to write cover letters was far more different. And again, as Sophia again mentioned, going back to the old applications helped me to understand as to what is it that this application process is looking at. Because again, trust me, this is not something that I would have, not the way that I write, not the way that I write certainly my CVs. And SJI has that thing where they'll vet your cover letters, where they'll vet your CVs, they'll design it for you. So I think those things help you to be at least you have all the resources at your disposal. It's just about approaching them and seeing as to how early that you can do it. And I think, yeah, project proposal for me at the end of the day was one of the large things that I really focused on, but obviously using everything that was there to offer. Yeah.
That's extremely helpful. Thank you both for sharing. Analia, you did not go the fellowship route. Can you talk a little about your post-grad planning? I know you mentioned you did an externship. If you could talk a little bit more about that.
Yes, well, it wasn't just the externship, but mostly the externship that helped me think about the things that perhaps I wanted to replicate or try to replicate. I mean, if it was possible, or to bring back home to improve the way I approach my work. So yeah, the externship was definitely important for that, and I think that that's part of the reason why I decided to
I think we might have
do that in particular, because it was a sort of mirror public defense practice works in the United States. Hello? Can you hear me? Hello?
Yes, we can hear you.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay, I'll just turn it off, the video off for a little while. So yeah, basically the externship allowed me to get the chance to see how public defense works in the United States, and to see what points we have in common and what points are different, and what things we can, can be replicated in order to improve our practice. So that was one issue, the issue of the things that I could take back home, and the other one was all the different research questions that I also brought back home, and trying to think about the intersection between refugee law and international law, which are, I mean, my background originally is basically international law, and then I got to refugee law through my practice, and then I also got to work a lot on domestic law also through my practice. So there are some interesting questions that come from the intersection of these sort of three areas that are very specific to refugee law and the refugee regime, and also the courses I took at Columbia allowed me to sort of broaden my perspective on those issues, understand better some of those issues, and bring back home some questions to continue working on that. And then in terms of planning, I mean, this might be, I don't know, this might be obvious, but I think maybe I should mention it, that if you know what you want to do, and you know that, for example, you don't need to take the bar exam, that's something, that information is also, it's useful to know that from the beginning, in order, because it will change. I mean, you will have a lot more freedom in order to choose the courses that you're going to take. So you have more freedom to explore the curriculum.
Great. So I want to make sure we get to questions from the audience. So I'd love to turn it over to our attendees. If you have any questions for our speakers, you can feel free to raise your virtual hand or just unmute yourselves and ask your question. We also welcome questions in the chat. And while you're thinking of any questions, I just wanted to flag that I put some fellowship deadlines in the chat, along with the website for further information. Yeah, so do we have any questions for our alumni speakers? Well, I have more questions. So still feel free to put any questions in the chat, but I would love to know from each of you, what is something you wish you knew about how you should plan for work and careers while you were a student?
I'm going to jump on that one. I think it didn't make much of a difference to me in the end, but I didn't know when I, this is a very specific thing, but when I enrolled for the externship, I didn't know that the externships, I don't know if that changed, but that the externship counts towards the OPT time. Is that still the case? Doing an externship for, I don't know, 4 months, then you had to discount those 4 months from the extra time you could stay working in the US. It didn't affect me, but I didn't know that. I learned that after the fact. And I think that that's something that might have affected some sort of career plan if you were planning on staying and didn't know that information. And the other thing would be to take advantage of the Columbia Career Services, even if you're not planning a career change or staying in the United States, or I mean, still take advantage of it. I mean, talk to them and, you know, about your plans, what you're thinking. I think that in all scenarios, that's going to be always helpful.
I agree, and I took advantage, for instance, of the services of LGI that they, for instance, they reviewed my CV, and here in Argentina we write 10 pages, 10-page CV, like very long CV with all the information from high school to our days. And so going there and I learned how to write a CV, how to write a cover letter. That was really helpful. And I think I don't know if this is something I wish I knew, but this is something that I keep thinking of, is that especially during the LLM program, we have to manage two like big enemies. The first one, anxiety and stress, and this idea of, oh my God, I have only 11 months and I have a lot of things to do. And there are so many opportunities, and I feel I'm missing everything because I mean, I don't have the time. And stress is one of our big enemies. So I think that one strategy to cope with this situation is to have your plans and your goals quite clear. And so like to stop and say, well, I want this, and in order to achieve this, I can take X, Y, Z steps. And so I can do, I can be a research assistant, I can take that course, etc. So take advantage, I mean, or choose the opportunities you're going to take advantage of based on your goals. You cannot go to every talk and large conversation, so you have to choose. And the second enemy is imposter syndrome, the feeling that you are not good enough. And because that's the reason why many times we don't send that email to that professor, we don't apply to that fellowship, because I am not good enough, they are not going to choose me. And I have this mantra in my life: the worst application is the application that is not sent. The worst email is the email that is not sent. Of course, always within certain levels of diplomacy and again, but send that email that is in your that you are writing since like 2 weeks ago. So send that. You should send that application. You should trust yourself, like have self-confidence. That's very important, and don't let anyone tell you that you are not good enough. So after this like motivational speech, the floor is yours.
No, I would just like to agree with whatever both of you have said, and I would have just said the same thing, that I think like use as much of the resources that Columbia is offering you, SJI, career services, everything, like absolutely helpful, and they're very approachable. You can disturb them as many number of times. Don't ever feel that you're doing something wrong, and which has been fairly helpful, and especially again, your professors. And apart from that, yeah, like this is something which was told to us. I think we were also like a pandemic batch, so I don't know how different it played out, but Columbia does try and give you, like with the last, the human rights, the LLM Public Interest Fellowship, they try and make sure that everyone has a funded project or a funded opportunity, even to a certain extent by the end of it. It's what their aim is at the end of the day. So I think if things work out fine, yeah, Columbia really puts its might behind students. So yeah, I think it's great to be just speaking to the SJI and everyone else. But yeah, everything that Sophia certainly said, absolutely top notch. Yeah, very important.
Absolutely. So do we have any questions from the audience? Hui, Helen?
I think there was someone from Matthew Hurt or something who wrote over there.
Hui, is she on?
Hi. Thank you so much for taking the time to talk to us, especially Chimney. I know it must be really late in India. So my question is for Hescon. I'm really sorry if I mispronounced your name, but I was wondering if you have any advice for some of us who are out there who also wants to do academia back in our home country. How would you advise us channel like the LM program to further our goals in going into academic and research? Thank you.
Wow, that's a good question. I'm not sure so the LLM here, first I should clarify that we have a particularity here in Argentina that it is very common for practitioners to also develop academic careers. So it's very common here for law professors to also practice law, which is not the case, at least for full-time faculty in the United States. It's a very different system, but it is very common here to both practice law and also teach law and participate in research projects and be engaged in postgraduate studies, either as a professor or as a student. And you do that, it's a bit crazy. You do that everything at the same time, which is the great thing about a program like the LLM, because you just focus on that for at least for a few months. I didn't particularly take courses or make decisions, consciously make decisions during my program that were directed at building an academic career. But what I did was take what I was studying, both the theory and the practice that I was seeing there, to feed the questions that I wanted to work on, papers and future research projects in my university and future possible PhD, etc. So I thought in my case it was very useful because you're there, you're just, because our daily life outside the LLM is so full of things. You don't have time. You're working and then you're going to teach a class and then maybe you're even studying. The good thing about the LLM is that you're just doing that and you have the opportunity of studying and analyzing the issues that you care about, and you have more time to do that. So yeah, my recommendation based on my experience would be to try to seize the time that you have during the LLM to sort of think about all those issues and use all the resources that the university gives you, so that when you go back home, you already have like the basis for your different research and academic projects that you would like to pursue, whether it is that you're LLM and you specialized in, or whether it is that you want to be a part of a research project or start a research project. That would be I think my connection was was fading away. That would be the advice.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
I think Matthew, you had your hand up. If you'd like to unmute and ask your question.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you. And I appreciate you calling me out because I was trying to figure out how to use the chat function and it didn't work. I guess my question is, what advice do you have for alumni who may be working in a completely different field? And I feel like you touched on this a little bit, but I mean, a lot of the resources seem like they are available to the LLM students who are currently at Columbia. Is this a ship that's already sailed for me, or is it possible to get into the field when you're already maybe mid-career in another field of law? Thank you.
I see your point, and we had, Analia and I had a colleague that came from the business or the more commercial law, and then went to the human rights field, and she was successful in doing so. And I think that's an issue related to my point about flexibility. And I think that you shouldn't think that you are starting from zero. I mean, you should think about all the skills that you might bring from a different area of law, and then try to incorporate them to your new path on human rights. For instance, if you have experience in negotiation, that might be really helpful for instance, in doing advocacy before state officials. And these skills on how to engage with people that might have different interests and maybe conflicting interests and so on. So that's something that you don't learn when you are doing human rights. And I think that human rights advocates, we are quite bad at doing that. So think about your skills. I mean, don't think that you are starting from zero. So, and in that case, use the LLM program like many times or in some ways to get theoretical knowledge on human rights. And if you want to do advocacy, for instance, I recommend the International Human Rights Advocacy course with Professor Hina Shamsi. That is very practical. You're going to learn like from specific case studies on LGBT rights, terrorism, and so on, from quite different topics. And she brings practitioners to the class, and you can interact with them. And so in that way, you can, or with this approach, you can get theoretical knowledge and then practical knowledge on how to be an advocate. But again, trust on your skills and try to adjust them to your new area of interest. That would be my advice to anyone trying to change, your career path. And it's never too late, I think.
Oh, it looks like we're at time, but I want to thank so much. Thank you to our fabulous alumni, Analia Cascone, Chinmay Kanoshia, and Sophia Minieri. Thank you so much for sharing your time and insights with us. And thank you to everyone who attended today's panel. The speakers have generously put their emails in the chat, so please feel free to reach out to them or to me with any further questions. And thank you again, and I hope everyone has a wonderful day.